Good evening, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, and adepts, to another episode of Knights of the Nephilim podcast, brought to you by my company, Celestial Oddities Radio. As always, I will be your host on this mystic and mysterious journey that we call Magick. My name is Frater Crow, and I want to thank you for listening in tonight. Whether listening live, streaming, or downloaded the episode after the fact, make sure you click the like, share, and follow buttons on whatever platform you're listening to us from iTunes to iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Google Play, Amazon Music, you name it, we are on it, so listen where you feel most comfortable. But the more that you click the like, share, and follow buttons, the more that it moves us up the podcast community rankings, more people that discover the show, and it also keeps you in loop with all the new episodes as they air, and allows you to jump back through our archives of past episodes, so that way you never miss a thing. And trust me, folks, there's something for absolutely everyone out there, so make sure you listen. And if you're new to the show, we do bring you a episode 3 times per month, normally on Thursday nights, 8 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But tonight is a special episode. J.S. Garrett is our guest for the evening, and we're going to have him on a little while back. Had some complications with one another, scheduling-wise, and we wanted to get him back in. But since we are booked up for a while, we made this a special episode. So hopefully you're listening out there and you enjoy tonight's episode. I think it's going to be a fun one. But we do have certainly a lot planned for you this evening. Before we jump into the episode and the guest itself, we do want to go ahead and thank our sponsors, Limitless Liberation and also Goetic Impressions. You can check them out at etsy.com, Limitless Liberation, and www.goeticimpression.com. Or I should say impressions.com, and check out both of those wonderful teams' works. Everything they produce is absolutely phenomenal. I use their work in my temple space, in my workings, in ceremonies, and sometimes just during my meditation practice as well. So certainly resonates with me, and I get a lot of energy from it and a lot of extra oomph on both sides. So check them out. I think you will certainly like what you find and pick up something for yourself or for a loved one soon. So, last few episodes, we've been having some really awesome guests on the show. Last episode was John Vermillion. We talked about his book, Asaya Kalexa, and then also The Stargate of Christ. And both of those books are to me, very profound as far as reaching that inner you, reaching those levels of your mind you haven't been able to reach yet, and really unleashing and unblocking your chakra system to reach that inner godhood. So if you missed last episode, make sure you jump in and check that out. It's something I think you certainly will love. As well as the episode before that, we had Wilmar Tall. Wilmar is from the Netherlands. He came on and talked to us about his book, about gnome magic and his hidden manuscripts that he had went over and released. It's very profound as well. So if you've missed those episodes, those are our last 2, so make sure you jump in and don't miss another thing. But tonight, we certainly have a wonderful guest. So let me tell you a little bit about J.S. Garrett and who he is, and then we'll jump in and let you tell him a little bit more about himself. But we will go ahead and tell you it from his perspective. I don't deal in labels, but if I had to choose a term to describe myself, it would be Metaphysical Mad Scientist. I am obsessed with rediscovering the secrets of great magicians of the ancient world, with figuring out how they accomplished the seemingly impossible, such as living for hundreds of years, parting oceans, raising the dead, or summoning storms to wipe out an entire army, to name only a few. I specialize in many different areas, but the things I am most passionate about is helping other magicians awaken their inner godhood, helping them to reach a level of power and ascent they never dreamed possible. And he certainly does that with his offerings that he offers to the public, with his own rites that he performs himself, with the books he's been a part of helping write, and with all of his videos and live streams that he offers, just a lot of education and influence. Ladies and gentlemen, we got J.S. Garrett. How you doing tonight, brother?
Hey, I'm doing great, bro. Thanks for having me. I want to say that it's an honor to be on the show. And I apologize again for messing up our last scheduled radio show there. That was totally my fault, and so thank you for opening another spot for me to come on and be a part of this.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely wanted to have you on the show, and I'm certainly someone who understands that complications come up from time to time with scheduling and things. I think we're both on the go a lot. Sometimes you look at your schedule and just say, oh, shit, wait a second. This isn't what I thought it was, and that happens to me quite often, so completely understandable, but we were able to get you back on and make it happen. That's all that matters. So once again, thank you for coming on tonight.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, man.
So I like to start out the shows very traditional. I mean, you call me old school if you want, but I think I like to find out who my guests are as far as what brought them to this point. So if you could, tell us a little bit about your upbringing, what led you into wanting to be in the magical kingdom as far as working with ceremonial magic and rites. Was it something that's always been a part of your family? Was it something you discovered and you were kind of the black sheep like myself? How did that come about for you?
All right. Well, I mean, it was something that was definitely a big part of my family generations past. The last real practitioner I've been able to find in my bloodline was my great grandmother, and it all, the family sort of became Christian from there. And she was Native American that married into our family that came from Europe. And she brought with her those old ways and teachings of, shamanic sorcery and things like that. So, I mean, I was very interested to find that out later on in life. But, I was not raised, I did not have like a magical upbringing. My family, they did not go to church. So I was lucky enough not to be brainwashed every Sunday. But I did get a healthy dose of brainwashing quite often from my mother, who was very, Bible thumper type Christian, and very hypocritical as well. So, I mean, it was like all the wrong influences, and I was taught to be afraid of anything supernatural or spiritual. And the house that I grew up in had a lot of poltergeist activity in it, and it still does to this day. And this was something that tormented me as a child. And so I would go to my mother, my father, and tell them about these experiences, and I would be like shamed for it. And not only was I told to be afraid of it, but I was told it was my fault, because if some type of demon or something was messing with me, then it must be my fault because I had to have invited it somehow. And so, I mean, I was like totally brought up to think ass backwards from the way that I think now. And, the way I became a practicing magician or started working with ceremonial magic was out of pure necessity. And the one thing that my childhood experiences, these things that terrified me, the one thing that did for me, it left no room for doubt in my mind that the supernatural was a real phenomenon, that spirits were very real and physical and separate from us. And so after being on the not so good end of that as a child, as I became an adult and started running into some serious hardships in my early adult life, I turned to the one thing that I believed could save my ass, and that was black magic. Is that I know this stuff is real, so how can I make it work for me instead of against me? How can I figure out how to align with these spiritual forces and put my life back together? And so that's exactly what I set out to do. And it didn't, it took me a while to find like good information. Like I was mostly shooting in the dark. I didn't, I'd go to like a library or a bookstore and buy something on witchcraft or the occult, and I'd end up throwing the book away after I'd read it, because there was absolutely nothing in there that was useful. And so I started just trying to make contact with these spirits. I started watching anything that I could find on YouTube, or looked for anyone I could find that could teach me anything. And it wasn't until I made contact with Belial that I actually started making headway and learning things that were useful and beneficial to me. And there's some really great books out there, like Evoking Eternity by E.A. Coetting, the Simon Necronomicon. These are books that I work with and get results from, but it's not until you reach out and actually make contact with an otherworldly intelligence that you really start breaking some ground. And so that was about 10 years ago now. And as soon as I figured out how to make magic work for me and started getting results, then I was just wide open. And I've been wide open ever since. Like, I've never slowed down. I just continue to build momentum, and I can never be satisfied. I'll make a breakthrough, and then I'm automatically chasing the next high, So that's me. I'm an extremist.
Well, I think that's a part of it. I mean, once you start to taste, and I don't want to say it's just a crave of power, but once you start to taste that power and you know that it's out there and you know what can be had, it is a thrill to know, where can I push this to? What is my bounds? Because obviously there's something beyond what I've been told or what the mainstream shows and says is real. So if that is the case and I'm able to tap into it, how heavily can I tap into it? And I think that's what we all do with further workings, because, I mean, from the time you start out to years later to even years down the road, where your growth is phenomenal to continue to see. If you're not growing, there's a problem. I mean, certainly at that point you need to look at it, but I think we all continuously grow and push those bounds of what can we do next.
Absolutely. I look at ritual magic and, spiritual path working in general. I look at it like a martial art. Like, it's a martial art of self-mastery. And, it's not necessarily, we all want power. We all want to be strong and powerful, but it's not like a lust for power to have over others or dominate and control other people. It's about having power over your own life and your own reality. And it forces you to take responsibility for the things that are occurring in your life. If you belong to like a right-hand path type religion, then it's easy to just say, oh, well, it was God's will that went wrong. Or my life didn't work out the way I wanted it to. It must not have been God's will. It's like the left-hand path is a little bit different. It's like, no, if your life didn't work out the way you wanted it to, it's because you didn't figure out how to make it work. And you really, that's where you start getting into the personal power and empowerment, is whenever you figure out how to make magic work for you and you realize, I can do a ritual or a spell to create real change in my physical reality, to construct the reality that I desire. Like, how can that not become an addiction for you once you get a taste of it? It's like, you can't stop. You don't want to go back, and there is no going back. You can never unknow that this stuff is real.
That's correct. I mean, once you know it's there, there is no going back. It sticks with you the rest of your life, whether you continue to practice avidly or someone who eventually steps down from doing ceremonial magic and you don't continue to follow the path. No matter what, you always know that there's something there, if you've done it successfully. Now, I know that there's people that I've met in the past, I started to try to do that, nothing ever happened for me, it's a bunch of bullshit. I'm like, well, then obviously you didn't reach any type of level that you should have been at, let alone higher levels, because if you did it properly, even on a lower level, you should have felt the change of atmosphere, you should have felt the change of the room. And if you didn't feel that, then maybe this isn't the right realm to be in, because as you said, it is a martial art, it is a mastery of self, and you might not be a black belt to start out with, but you can learn how to kick if you take the time to do it. So it's pretty profound. How long have you been in magic workings at this point then?
Well, I did my first spell experiment, my first ritual magic spell when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
And, it was actually a curse. So, I'm a 10-year-old kid, and my mother had accused a man of assaulting her. All right. And so, like any other 10-year-old boy that loves their mother, I wanted to do something about it. I wanted revenge. Only I was 10 freaking years old. What was I going to do? Even if I could get my hands on the guy, what's a 10-year-old going to do? And so I'm like, I know, I'll throw some voodoo at him, And so, I mean, as a kid, seeing people stab voodoo dolls in movies and TV shows and things like that, that was really like the only thing that came to my mind. And so, I had a friend over for a sleepover, and so me and this friend and my little brother, we melted down some candles in a frying pan, and then molded a little doll out of the wax, and we carved the person's name into the doll, And then we made like this little triangle of candles and set in a circle around it, or in a triangle formation, and stood there and took turns like heating up needles and stabbing it through it, and each time we were verbalizing, what we wanted to happen to the guy. And you got you got 3 10-year-old kids sitting around that absolutely believe in the magic that they're doing. They are going to get results, and we absolutely did. It took about 2 weeks, and then the guy was cutting down trees, and he somehow cut down a tree, and then it fell on top of him and broke half the bones in his body. And so,
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I attributed that to the spell because it was shortly after the spell had happened. Only I was not happy about it. I was furious because the goal was to kill this guy that hurt my mother, and that's not what happened. So I said, well, screw this. This didn't work out, And so then I just went off and started looking for other stuff. And that's really what I'd run into every single time as a dumbass kid that didn't realize the potency of what I was doing. I would start doing experiments with spells, and I would have a partial success or a failure even, and each time I'd throw my hands up and say, oh, that's bullshit, and I get frustrated and walk away from it. It wasn't until like I really found my ass in a pinch about 10 years ago that I really dove in head first and took this stuff seriously and came at it from a very logical perspective. And it wasn't just experimenting with spell work, it was with evocation. It's like I'd never, I'd done like little sympathetic magic spells and things like that and gotten some results or partial results, but I'd never summoned an entity. And so it took me 3 days to do it, 3 days straight of trying to call forth this entity known as Belial. And I didn't really know how to do an evocation, so I memorized an incantation and a conjuration for him, and I just verbalized that over and over and over for 3 days straight. Like anytime I was alone in the shower, driving down the road, laying in bed at night, going to sleep, I was speaking this over and over again. And it was like each time I would say it, I would feel like these tingles go through me. I feel like he was getting a little bit closer, And so I just kept on and on and on. I was not going to give up or take no for an answer because I was desperate. And it's out of desperation that magicians perform the greatest feats or the greatest miracles. And so on the third day, it was right at 72 hours since I had started trying to summon him, Belial shows up. And that was the first time that I had ever saw a manifestation of anything, really, other than a ghost in a house, when I was a kid. I'd see little manifestations there, but like actually, like you can call it hallucinating. I don't know if someone else would have been there if they would have saw the same thing, but this entity showed up visually. And then I felt this crazy, like a lightning bolt slowly coming through the top of my head and filling my body with electricity. And he starts speaking to me telepathically. And very clearly in my mind, I'm hearing his voice. And, that was like the biggest holy shit moment of my life up until the next day when I got exactly what I asked for. Long story short, my family and we had gotten attacked by 4 meth heads at a private swimming pool, and I had no other choice but to utilize deadly force to protect and save my family. Well, that resulted in me getting 4 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, because we were in Georgia at the time, and in Georgia, you do not have a right to defend yourself. So you have a right to call the police and curl up in a ball and wait for them to get there and hopefully save you in time. So anyway, I was facing these charges, and I'd watched one of E.A. Koetting's videos, one of his earlier YouTube videos, where he was talking about Belial, saying that he was the ideal spirit to work with to help someone with legal matters. And so that's who I decided to try to summon first. And so whenever he shows up, he says, "What would you have of me?" And he kind of chuckles, because of course they already know. They know everything. They already know you're going to call them before you know you're going to try. And so I asked for the charges to be dropped, for the felonies against me to be dropped. And he said, "Okay, what else?" I'm like, "Well, I want protection for my family, so this doesn't happen again." "Okay, what else?" So, "Well, I'd love to become a master magician." I don't believe that there are any masters, but that was the term that I used at the time. I said, "I want to become a master magician. I want to learn the black arts directly from you. I want you to initiate me into your current and teach me how to do this right." And he says, "Okay." And so 24 hours later, I get a call from my lawyer telling me that the felony charges are being dropped. He's like, I've never seen this happen before. We've been fighting these charges for 4.5 years and haven't made any headway. And the best plea bargain they would offer me was a 20-year, 20 do 10. And yeah, so they absolutely were not budging. And then all of a sudden, the next day, the DA has a change of heart and decides I don't deserve to go to prison because I did what I should have done as a man and a father and a husband. So that was amazing. My jaw hit the ground. I just about passed out, and I've been wide open ever since. I underwent full possession with Belial, and he took me to school every single day for 6 months straight. And then the last 3 months that I worked with him were my 3 months of torment, where he essentially took me apart and put me back together and forged me into the magician I am now.
No, that's amazing. And you answered several of the questions I was going to ask, so that's great. I was going to ask, did Belial really reach out to you and speak to you and you were connected in that manner, or did you find him? And in this case, you answered that by saying that you've seen something from E.A. Coetting talking about him being good to work with on legal matters, which kind of launched you to do that. And then it's funny how those things come together. That specific step to help with legal regards led into becoming, a much more advanced magician. So it's pretty interesting that that's how that came about. I was going to ask, what led you into specifically evocation work, which that answers that as well. So that's great. I know that you were heavy on working with Belial, but I never knew the original story. For the folks out there listening, you can't see it because me and him are on video with one another, but you guys only get the audio. I mean, there is a symbol and sigil of Belial behind him, and that's something you would often see in his videos that he does with his live streams, with his different videos that he makes for his YouTube channel. So I'm glad you got to explain that, because I knew that that was almost your patron daemon that you work with. I think we all kind of have one that we specifically gravitate towards, but it's awesome, as you said, when you have that first moment they arrive.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many times after that first one is that one that when it happens, you're like, holy shit. Even though you know these things are real in your heart, even though obviously you're chasing after them or you wouldn't be doing it, that is that nail in the coffin that makes it 100% real at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And this altar that I've got behind me with this goat skull, that's actually, it's red paint that has my blood mixed in with it, that I painted his sigil on a black mirror, and I will actually sit there and work with him through that mirror, working with my own shadow, and through the sigil of Belial. And I also have his sigil tattooed across my back. So I mean, yeah, I absolutely work with him. I'll never stop. I feel like all path workings sort of begin and end with Belial anyway. Like he's like the ultimate guide on all of these path workings that I've done. Like I always end up coming back to him or being redirected unto him to teach me things and guide me through these path workings. And I don't know if it's like that for everyone, but it's absolutely like that for me. And that's really where the journey began. And I'm sure that's where it ends.
No, that's great. I mean, like I said, I think it's weird because you meet different people who have different callings to a very specific entity. For some reason, that entity is the one that they are to learn from and the one that they are to work with. Obviously Belial is a heavy hitter and a lot of people work with Belial. Other people, myself, I have worked with Belial, but I seem to always be drawn back to working with Asmodee. For some reason, for years, he has been my teacher. For a lot of evocational works, and has shown me a lot of things and lessons within myself that I've learned and grown from. But they all do that. It's just sometimes for some reason we're connected, whether astrologically, who knows? There's just some type of bridge that connects us closer than others.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a genetic thing. I don't know if it has to do with our bloodline or just the energy makeup of our soul. That which is us. Each of these entities have their own energetic current, and they might be similar or adjacent or all tie into the source at the same point, but each of these different entities have different currents of energy, and they're going to mesh with certain people better than they do with others. And so I mean, they say each person has like their own patron daemon and their own guardian angel. It's like something that you hear over and over. And I'm going to say that's probably true. Now, Belial did not, at least not to my knowledge, he didn't. I mean, he could have been there all along. Part of me thinks that he was. You know, he might have even been one of the entities that tortured me as a child to show me how real this stuff was. I feel like he's always been there, but it was me that was driven to the point to reach out and make contact. And you know, with the way all of that happened, you know, even the people that attacked us, they did not look coherent in their faces. Like, I know they were drug addicts, but I mean, I've seen drug addicts before. They did not, I mean, they looked possessed. They looked like freaking, like they were under some type of hypnotic trance to where I'm not even sure if they knew what they were doing when they attacked us. Like, it was so crazy how it all happened. And so I've got to wonder, you know, is this like something I was always destined to do, and that was the only way to jerk my ass into the fire and force me to do it? You know, if that's the case, then I'm cool with it. You know, I wouldn't want to go through any of that stuff again, but I'm glad that I did, looking back, because I do not like, when I look back, I don't like the person that I was before all of this. You know, I'm not proud of the man that I used to be. I was not a bad person, but I was not someone that I was proud of. And I feel, I like what I see when I look in the mirror now. And that's not a vanity thing, but it's like in the word of, you know, in the words of Tony Robbins, you know, I look at myself, I'm like, I built this motherfucker, you know, and it was not easy. And so it's, you know, ourselves end up being our greatest accomplishments at the end of this, because it is a path of self-mastery. And, you know, it's a path that we're never done with. You know, you're never done fortifying your vessel. You're never done learning. You know, there is way too much out there for one person to learn in a single lifetime. So we're always students, even after we're teachers.
We are, and I like how you said that. Is that's the biggest difference, I think, that separates a lot of right-hand path faiths and, you know, being a left-hand path practitioner, is that I don't work on bettering myself to appease some magical deity in the sky that may or may not exist to impress him. I don't live my life for someone else or for anything else other than me. That's why a left-hand path practitioner will do those things. They'll be a good man. They'll live a good life, but they're doing it to perfect themselves, to strengthen who they are on the inside. And our greatest accomplishment, as you said, is ourselves. And I think you nailed it with, there is a very good possibility that Belial did set things in motion for you that could almost even be harmful for you and your family, that you overcame and did what you needed to in that moment, but would set in motion a series of events that would ultimately lead you to him, to work with him, and to lead you into who you were to become, to shed the skin of who you once were and then lead you into the future of you. And I think that happens. And a lot of people can say that's a little far out. No, from my experience, there were a lot of things that when they happened at the time and even years later didn't mean much, just seemed strange, but now I look at them in a series of events that I'm like, holy shit, they connect to one another in ways that you would have never fathomed, but they seem to all be in correlation with one another to have led me to right where I'm at now. And when you look at that, you're like, wow, something bigger is at hand. Now, someone could say, oh, it's God. God's at hand. Well, I don't believe that, because a lot of the shit that's happened has been pretty horrible, and maybe it is God. I don't know. But something has led me down a path to where I am at the current time, as has for you, and it's interesting that you know, how it comes about, that sometimes huge obstacles need to be thrown in our path to ultimately get over, to know that we have the strength to do it, and slowly over time rediscover who and just what we actually are.
Yeah, and I think that's true for everybody, you know, in one way or another. You know, because we're all here for some type of reason. You know, I think all humans are equally important as well as equally not important in the grand scheme of things. You know, you think about it, we're like you know, ants on an anthill. We're like bacteria on the earth. You know, we're so small in comparison to the grand scheme of the entire cosmos, you know, but at the same time, we wield such profound power to be able to connect with these energies and affect the cosmos. So, I mean, you know, everybody's got a story, you know, everybody has, you know, experienced things that made them who they are. And some people seem to benefit from those greatly, and it seems to destroy other people, you know. So, I mean, it's like we ultimately have the choice. We can lay down and die whenever things get bad, or we can find a way out of an impossible situation. You know, anything is possible if you're determined enough. And like I said before, it's desperation. That's what always I hear from people like other sorcerers. You know, how did you do this? How did you accomplish this? How did you create this or become the sorcerer you are today? And it's always out of some type of desperate situation that forced them to evolve and transform into that being that they are now. And it's never easy. It's never easy. And, you know, if it was easy, then a lot more people would do it. You know, the easy thing to do is to just go to church every Sunday and throw some money in the collection plate and, you know, say, okay, I'm going to heaven. You know, that's all I have to do. You know, it's like, it's not easy to take control of your own reality and take responsibility for your own life. That is the path of thorns, and it's absolutely worth it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I would never be happy just being a sheep. And, you know, that's why my motto is turn sheep into wolves. I don't think we're sheep. I think we're all wolves that have been duped. You know, society, religion, government, television, everything is designed to make a sheep out of you and tell you that, you know, it's wrong to reach for personal power. And anytime you see someone reaching for power in a movie or a book, it always destroys them, you know. So they're programming us to be sheep, to just lay down and give everything over to a higher power and pay your taxes, go to work, you know, don't step out of line or we'll throw you in prison. Don't step out of line or we'll throw you in hell after you die, you know. So you've got all these people terrified to do anything, you know. If you're not afraid of prison, then you're going to be afraid of hell. And if you're not afraid of hell, you'll be afraid of prison. And, you know, the 10% of those people who aren't afraid of anything keep our prisons full. So, I mean, you know, prisons got to stay full or they don't make any money. And I think the U.S. has more incarcerated people than any other country. So, I mean, it's a fucked up system. It really is. And it's not easy to go against the grain and overcome that and build your own heaven here on this planet, your own reality of your choosing.
And I think that's the ultimate goal, though. I mean, it's not meant for, and as you said, I don't believe anybody's necessarily sheep. I believe, and it's funny that you do use that because I've used that for years as well, is you know, the Lord is the shepherd and you are a sheep in his flock. Well, that's a lot of people like, you know, get wood off that idea. I don't. I think that's the worst fucking thing in the world is you are a part of his flock. I'm a flock. I'm a herd mentality. Throw me in the group with the others and let me follow blindly the man with the staff. I don't do that. I am the wolf that sneaks in and eats them both. And I'm fine with that. And I've always have been, and I went to Catholic school and learned that life and never felt right from an early age hearing the word of God and hearing what they said. And it's not against anything that, you know, that are Christian listeners out there or people that I doubt I have any, but if there are any, it's nothing against you. You believe what you want to believe, but there was a lot of unanswered questions. And when I would ask these questions, I would get scolded in school for questioning the word of God. And I never understood that because everything should be questioned, even not myself. If I'm telling you something and it doesn't sit right with you, question it because that is your right as a wolf to do so. Don't ever blindly follow. And you know, not too many people do that. That is the hard, solitary path to leave the herd and say, I'm going to leave the comfort of the herd and walk off onto my own path. And it's going to be dark. It's going to be dangerous. I'm going to be alone. But you know what? Through those lessons that I will learn, I will come out the ultimate victor because I am learning things that the path couldn't teach me if I stuck with the herd. So I think that leads us, you know, that separates who is a leader amongst who likes to be led, and that's sad. Is not there's not enough leaders out there. But I think it has to be that way. I think there can only be so many people that ascend. My belief of the system is that there has to be a tremendous amount of souls that when they die have not reached the level that they should have reached, and they will just continue to churn the pot. There has to be things to keep this world going. When you die, you become energy. That energy gets recycled back into physical bodies to experience it again. But there are those beings that reach the level of ascension through self-work, through mastery. And whether that's right path or left path or whatever you want to call yourself, that is the ultimate goal, but that's going to be the few and far in between. So it's always great to see practitioners that, like yourself, not only do that for themselves, but allow and help others out there to reach that level for themselves, because there's a lot of distortion. There's a lot of, fog in this scene. When someone's getting into magic for the first time, I mean, God, I got in quite a long time ago, but I can only imagine someone today being their first day into magic. You start looking on the computer, there's a million authors, there's a million practitioners. A lot of them are fucking trash, and I say it all the time, and that shocks a lot of people listening to my show. You have a show where you interview magicians, but yet you say that most of them are trash. Yes, most of you guys fucking suck, and I have no problem saying that. But there are some hidden gems, but it's because there's so much material now and so much shit out there. It's how do you find what is of true value? And then one of the questions I was going to ask you tonight is, for someone starting out right now, what advice would you give them as far as finding out their path, what they need to be doing, what can they do to save themselves time and hurt that maybe it took you a while to learn those lessons? What kind of valuable advice would you give to someone right now?
Well, whenever someone's starting out, they normally start out with reading books, researching magic, to get an idea, a concept of a foundation of what it is and how it works. I would say after you've done your research and you kind of have an idea of what direction you want to go, you figured out what you're interested in. You find your drug of choice, okay? Once you find your drug of choice, then you throw the books away, okay? Throw them back on the shelf and stop listening to anybody else and make contact with an entity. Make direct contact with a higher consciousness, like Belial or whoever you feel drawn to working with, and learn directly from the spirits themselves. That's where you're really going to start learning the good stuff, and that's where you're going to start pioneering the area that you are interested in. And the other thing I could say is, dive in head first. Don't hold anything back. If you're afraid of it, then charge it head on, because fear is really the only thing I see holding anyone back. The dogmatic fear and stereotypes that come with black magic and demons and all of this other stuff that scares people. It's put in a scary package like that by the powers that be to keep you from ever experiencing it, to keep us from ever reaching our true potential. So, I mean, if something doesn't seem scary, then it's probably not good. Spiritual predators don't dress up like black magicians and, seem all scary, like spiritual predators put on a white robe and claim to be a pillar of light, and, I agree with what you said earlier too, about a lot of magicians are trash. It's just like any other spiritual system that you can make money at, like church. I mean, you're going to have con artists. You're going to have people that take advantage of you. You're going to have people sitting in their grandma's basement writing books on magic that don't have two dimes to rub together, but you can supposedly accomplish all of your dreams utilizing their system whenever they haven't accomplished any of it themselves. It's important to look at a person's personal life and see what have they done with what they are teaching. How has it worked for them before you consider, trying to make it work for you. And ultimately, the spirits will end up being your guide. You can only learn so much from another person. There's a lot of great teachers out there. There are some great books out there, some gems, as you were saying. But, find what resonates with you personally. Find what you're interested in. Learn as much as you can about it, and then pioneer it even further. And that's how you'll do great things. That's how you'll create things and build yourself into a machine that generates its own heaven here on this physical plane.
And that's it. And I'm glad you actually said what you said, because it goes back to one of your videos a little while back about the fact that there are so many people offering ritual magic practice work where you can hire me to do this, you can hire me to do that. I will teach you how to become everything that you've ever wanted to. But then you look at them, they're looking like they're pretty damn close to death. They're heavily obese. They live in their mother's basement, like you said. They're poor as fuck. Their car isn't working. You seen them make a post 2 nights ago about, can someone give me a ride to the store? But then this person's supposed to teach you how to become a master. And then you're like, well, wait a second, I don't understand. But they're like, I promise you, it's foolproof. Well, if it's foolproof, why the hell ain't you using it? And that's the problem is it's easy to sell a bag of shit if you wrap it in gold. But it's still a bag of shit at the end of the day. And yes. That's what a lot of it is I can package it, I can promote it, I can market it, I can make it sound great. But one of the things that we touched on in several past episodes is the fact that there are a lot of occult writers or a lot of occult bloggers that never step into the circle. And that's why the main motto of this show is step into the circle, because you should be doing it often. There's people that have all these great theories, and I'm not saying the theories and ideas don't have a place. Doesn't mean that every person who writes on occult magic and metaphysics has to be a practitioner. You would hope they would, but some of them have had amazing work. Eliphas Levi did not really practice magic, but he wrote some profound books. Some of the most profound ever written. So it can be done, but in most cases, you have to be a practitioner who steps into the circle. And a lot of these cats don't. They write, books about thoughts that they haven't actually practiced, or they talk about selling, featured, rituals that they actually don't do. They take your money, they tell you it's done, and your hope, if anything, and it happens, it's really just the luck of the draw, and your hope might have actually brought it to life rather than theirs. And I think that happens quite often.
Yeah, I think that happens quite often too. There are a lot of frauds doing ritual for hire. I've had people like book me for consultations or message me on Facebook asking how to do rituals, like how do I do a spell for this? How do I do an evocation? And then a month later, they're a professional magician online offering ritual for hire. And I'm like, wait a second, didn't you just start practicing like a month ago? So I mean, it's those people are in it for the wrong reasons, and they're not actually doing the work. And I know several occult authors, people that have written books about magic or how to perform magic, that have never actually done any of the spell work in their book, and their lives are shit. I've had some well-known professional magicians over here in person, and when it comes time to lop the head off a rooster, they won't do it. So I mean, it's hard to find a good practitioner to do magic for you. And that's why I say, if they won't sit down and talk with you face to face, if they won't like send you a video of the ritual, or at least photographs of it taking place throughout, like picture proof, video proof that they actually did what you hired them to do, then I wouldn't trust them. And I'm not talking about any specific person, and I'm not trying to offend any of these people, but it's the hard truth. Don't claim you can do it for someone else if you haven't done it for yourself yet.
Exactly. I mean, you have to be able to know what you're doing for you to be able to do it for someone else. I think, you should be a master of these arts. So if you're offering 7 different rituals, you should be able to do them with your eyes closed to a T and know that you can hit it dead on each and every single time for yourself before you ever take it on for someone else. Because if I'm doing something for you, I want to do it better than I've done it for myself. That's just the type of person I am. If I'm going to go out of my way to help you, whether you're paying or not, if I'm going to go out of my normal path to help you, I want to make sure that it brings everything that you truly want. But if I can't make it happen for myself, how the hell am I going to make it happen for you? And it just seems like that's a big thing in the occult scene these days. And it's funny because, I started out quite a while back, before really the internet stage had even kicked in. I didn't know any other practitioners. It was me. It was me reading, the Sworn Book of Honorius, and reading the Picatrix, and reading books on Cyprian, and all these other great, influential people from the grimoires that I started studying, and no one else did this. So there was no ritual for hire. You had to figure it out. And then it started becoming popular and more popular. And then now it is like a common thing. As you said, someone says, how do you do a candle magic spell? The basic of the basic. And then a month later, they're like, I am a god amongst men. I can do anything you need me to do. I will summon any demon. And it's like, bro, you were just asking me about candle magic. Like, what the fuck? There's no way you've ever summoned anything. Yep. It is a wild scene that we live in right now. But why don't you, since we're on this topic, tell the folks out there, since you do offer different services, what it is that they can hire you for from your site, jsgarrett.com.
All right, cool. Well, I want to start by saying that every single ritual that I've ever offered to other people publicly, I created for myself. And I've done it over and over and over again and gotten results with it before I ever think about doing it for someone else. And so, I've got several rites that are available on my website. I've got the very first one, the most popular one, the rite of deification. That's really how I became a magician for hire. I didn't set out to do this professionally. I was just a magician, and I created this ritual or channeled this ritual, and it was so profound that I published it in the Anthology of Sorcery, Volume 3, through Become a Living God. And people went crazy for it. I was getting message after message, people demanding that I do this right for them and offering me any amount of money I wanted to do it for them. And so it wasn't long before Timothy hit me up. He was like, hey, man, we're getting a lot of people asking about this. Let's put it in the catalog. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I guess I'd make a little money here and there. I figured I might get booked like once a month or something like that. And we got like 9 or 10 bookings in the first week that it was on. And it just became a full-time thing like overnight. It was like, oh, wow, okay, cool. So, I started putting out some of the other rites that I developed that helped me put my life together. So I've got a wealth and prestige rite that I perform with Suntalak, and that's what really changed my life financially. And I've done that well over 1,000 times at this point for not just myself, but for clientele as well as my friends and family. And I get excellent results with that ritual. I've got a love spell on there to help people, find a partner or help people fix a broken relationship. And, some people hire me to try to get their ex back, that's tricky. That's a relationship that's already failed once. So, if you catch it in time, then that's doable. And sometimes they still come back, even like a year later. But I really recommend, with a love spell, leaving it up to the spirit to choose a perfect partner for you. I don't like to try to force a bad relationship to become good. But, that's usually, that's up to the client. If it's not something I'm willing to do, then I'll just tell them I'm not willing to do it. I've got the Court of Belial, which is the same ritual that I performed with Belial to fix my own legal situation. I do that for other people as well. And these are all sacrificial rites. They entail blood and animal sacrifice. My blood as well as the sacrifice of an animal, which is typically a rooster. I raise chickens and I raise quail for food and eggs, and I also sacrifice them to the spirits in my magical practices. And that's probably why I get hired so much. I'm one of the most hired magicians that I know of, and I'm probably the only person that I know of that offers sacrificial rites like this. And I think that's why people come to me so much, because not only do I get results through this technique, but that is the most powerful form of magic that I've found. If you really can't go wrong with it. Blood is spiritual currency. All spirits want blood, whether it's an angel, a demon, a fairy, or whatever you want to call it. They will all accept blood sacrifices, and that is like setting off a nuclear bomb inside the circle or the triangle, whatever it is you're using. Whenever you decapitate that animal, it is an explosion of life force energy leaves that body at the point of death. And that spirit that is present within the flames absorbs that energy. You spill the blood into the flame, and you may even place the body into the flame as a sacrifice of burning flesh and blood, something that's been done for millennia. And they take that energy that you are giving them and utilize that energy and power from that sacrifice to manifest what it is you're asking for. So I mean, it's currency. You are paying for it up front. You're not making a deal, something that you got to do later on. You're not making a pact. You are summoning a spirit, asking them for a favor, and then offering them a sacrifice in return for that favor, which makes that entity more powerful. It feeds that spirit, it makes them stronger, and it gives them a power source to manifest what you're asking for. So, I mean, those are the sacrificial rites that I offer. I also offer like radionic spells and things like that are much more affordable because they don't take me all night to perform. You know, I'm spending at minimum 12 hours to do a sacrificial ritual. You know, whereas I can set up a radionics box and do a ritual over that in about an hour's time. So I can do that a lot cheaper, and I can do a lot more of those. So yeah, I mean, it's I try to offer something for everybody, a variety of things and different price points that people can afford. But the real gold is the sacrificial rites.
Well, it has power behind it. And I mean, you said it. I personally myself don't, do a lot of sacrificial rites. I have, but I as a tendency normally don't, but I will tell you that you do have a key of opening something beyond by not only offering blood, but by offering blood into flame. It's a secret that I think most people don't know of. It takes me back to my very first rite ever. As you said, that moment whenever Belial showed to you, that was that big aha moment that happened to me at the age of 16 years old with a blood rite that I didn't really know what I was doing. I kind of went in. It was, as you said, when you're at that pivotal moment where you have to have it happen. You are in dire need of it working. I think I was at that in life. I just was not happy with life. I didn't think I wanted to be here anymore. And the only thing I really held on to in life was my satanic beliefs and practices. And I performed a ritual. We offered blood into the flame, and shit just went haywire. We didn't have the control. We didn't have the wisdom. We didn't have the focus that obviously I have now. So it was kind of doing its own thing. But yes, we did an evocation my very first time, and something showed up, and I kind of expected it to, but at the same time didn't expect it to. So when it actually had shown up, it was like one of those holy fuck moments. But you're right, that is exactly what it is you have already paid for their arrival and paid for their working and their helping without having to do the IOU. I think that's a big thing a lot of people do is grant me my wishes and I will give you this. And it's looking at it like, well, if you're not going to give it to me now, I don't really give a shit about giving you anything. Whereas if you pay for it up front and you were showing this is in honor of you, this isn't a do this and you get this. This is for you either way, whether you do it or not. I am in reverence of you. Show me results and I will give you more. And you get a lot better results that way. Most of the time it's my own, but like I said, animal sacrifice or whatever it might need to be to get you to that level, it's all a matter of what reaches that doorway for you, and I know that it certainly has a lot of power in it.
Yeah, that's really what it's about, is generating enough power to do what I'm trying to do. And a lot of magicians will go wrong. They'll summon a spirit or a demon or an ancient god and ask for favor after favor after favor, and they're not really giving them anything substantial in return.
Yes.
Like sooner or later your friends are going to get tired of just doing you favors. I mean, a little bit of respect goes a long freaking way, and I'm not saying these beings won't help you if you're not able to offer a sacrifice, but offering your own blood is acceptable in most cases. You offer what you can. So I mean, if I've got a coop full of chickens out back that I could offer, but I'm too lazy to do it, and I'm just going to prick my finger, then, the spirit's going to be like, okay, I appreciate that, but, you could take a little bit of extra time and effort here and give me a sacrifice, something substantial to really get results. And, I think the biggest place that people go wrong when they approach magic is from like the Western sorcerers perspective, where they're trying to constrain the entity and trying to force it to do what they want it to do. That's never going to work out for you. I mean, that's why you hear so many horror stories about people like dabbling in magic and evocation and things like that, because they summon a being that's as old as time and has godlike power and try to threaten them into doing them a favor. I wouldn't respond well, and neither would you or anybody else if you were that god or that demon. So I think it's important to earn the respect of these spirits that you're asking to help you. And the burning flesh and blood, I mean, that's straight out of the Old Testament. That's where
Yes.
I really realized, was reading the Christian Bible when I realized how powerful of a practice that was. It is the story of Cain and Abel, where one brother offers burning fruits and veggies, and, the other brother offers burning flesh and blood from his livestock. And that was what their God preferred, or that entity that they thought was God preferred, and that's what led Cain to killing his brother, as a sacrifice to try to appease this entity. So, I mean, and you look at the Inquisition, like every person that they burned at the stake for being a witch, that was a sacrifice of burning flesh and blood to empower the Christian God, and help that religion take over the fucking world. So, and other religions like Islam and, pretty much every other mainstream religion has got some genocide or something like that in its background. What is it that drives people of a faith to commit mass murder in the name of their God? It's because that God wants to be fed. Those lives that they dedicate the death of to that entity, that spirit is becoming stronger from that. And, the fire, offering blood into fire, that's a very necessary tool, the fire is, because flame transmutes energy, so that you spill the energy, you spill the blood, which is the raw energy, into the flame, and then the flame transmutes that energy into a form of energy that the spirit can fully absorb. It's much more potent than just spilling it on the ground. If you just sacrifice something and spill the blood on the ground, then the spirit might absorb the life force that's being released from the sacrifice at the time of death, and they might absorb some of the essence or energy from the blood that's spilling on the ground as it's evaporating, but you're wasting so much of that energy by not placing it into the flame, if
Correct.
that makes sense to people. I'm not saying I'm right. Don't take my word for shit. Just, this is what I do and it works for me, and I've proven that, not just to myself, friends, and family, but to thousands of clients that I've done these rites for. And, 95% of the people that book me for a ritual, they come back and have me do other rituals for them. And they would not do that if they did not work. You can't stay in business doing ritual for hire for very long if you don't get results.
Correct. Yeah. If you're not, I mean, you might get away with it for a little while, but after, 2 years, 200 clients say, shit didn't happen for me. It's going to start to get around. Word's going to get around. I mean, who's to say? I mean, there are some out there that I know for a fact do not make happen what they say they can do, and they've somehow still been able to survive. But you're going to have those, but for the most part you're not going to survive in this scene if you cannot produce results. And a big way that I say of proving someone's legitimacy is look at their rituals, look at how they're performed, look at their ritual space or their altar. Now that can go both ways. Just because someone has a fancy altar doesn't mean that they know shit. I know people that use nothing on their altar. They are a black canvas and that is it. And they have candles and they are able to produce and make amazing things happen. But most of the time you will feel it in the warmth of that altar. When you look at it, it doesn't matter if it's glitz or glamour or not. You look and say, you know what, this person's legit. They do the practice. This isn't staged and it also isn't blank. Or look at their temple space. I mean, look at your backyard. You put a lot of work into that yard, into your spot to do your workings, and you can tell it just by looking at it. Yeah, sure, someone could stage that, but I see the passion, I see the heart, and I see the will that you've put into that to make these ritual workings work. It's evident just by watching any of your workings.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I do spend a lot of time. I probably spend twice as much time setting up my ritual space for a ritual than most people spend doing the entire operation.
I agree.
I spend a lot of time building and setting the sacred space. And that circle, that represents the center of the universe. That is where I'm making miracles happen. It's so much more than just laying out a circle. There's rituals that go into just creating the ritual space. And before, like, say, the rite of deification, like, there's an hour-long preparation ritual that I do before each one of those to ensure that the ritual is a success, to keep it from being hijacked, to provide protection over the ritual space as well as over the client that I'm working with out of body, because I consider that to be a vulnerable state, And I've always taken those precautions, and I've never had a ritual like that go wrong. I've never had a bad reaction to the deification rite or any of the other ones that I'm offering. I'm not saying that, doing crazy experiments, that shit can't happen. It absolutely can, but that's why it's important to perfect a ritual before you start doing it for other people.
Yes.
So, that's where the trust factor comes in. You have to be able to trust the person that you are paying money to meddle in your life, to create change in your life, because you want that change to be a good change, not a bad change.
I agree. And I mean, you said it right there, that there should be prep work that goes into the pre-ritual. And there's a lot of people that jump right into working it. Now, do I go through those steps each and every day because I perform ritual each and every day? No, I don't. But when I do my larger scale rituals once a week, once a month, because I do, the way I kind of set mine is I do every single day rituals. On weekends I always do one large scale, and then I do one very large scale per month, and I have kind of different classifications of what I signify as each one. Now, my everyday rituals, I don't do cleansings of my entire space other than a normal regular cleansing ritual. My weekend and my one per month, I go through an entire setup of cleansing the space, exercising the area, and cleansing everything with consecrated salt, with wiping my tools down and reconsecrating them. It's important to go through those steps of gaining the most energy. I could still receive results without doing that, but I notice once I go through those steps of true preparation of my temple, like you said, doing more in those steps than most people spend in the ritual themselves, then once I hit the ritual, it feels smoother, it feels cleaner, and I am in a mind state that I need to be in. And that produces the best results. So I'm a big fan of that. I meet a lot of practitioners who just jump right in. I've used the same circle and I've summoned 100 different daemon spirits or angelic spirits. I don't do cleansings and this and that. Well, that's okay, but you're leaving a lot of metaphysical condensation on those walls, on those tools, that you're not getting rid of whenever you do the next one. And you might still have results, but now you're mixing energies and forces that can give you not as powerful one and can also dilute what it is that you were going to get. I'm glad you said that, because I think that's something that's often missed. You also had touched on, I use a circle myself. I don't often use the old grimoire style of using God and angelic names and using a blasting rod and beating down daemon spirits into submission. Have I done it? Yes. Because I started out with Solomonic practice in the Goetia and using the lesser and greater keys. I will still use that work from time to time. Arundel Overman had recently released the illustrated lesser key of Solomon, and it's beautiful, and I told him that I would rework the system of his book, now updated to the current generation, and see if I get different results as I once did when I used the Mathers edition and Crawley edition. So I am going to do that again, in a certain regard, only with a few spirits as a experiment, to see how it works, but I don't do it in a sense of treating these things as my lesser. I am equal to. I don't bow down to them as they are my king, but I also don't make them bow down to me. I look at them as brothers. And that's the great results I get. I don't believe in having to restrain them and force them into a corner, because, as you said, if you offer them a good offering, a good sacrifice, if you are true in heart and your will is strong enough and you have enough focus, you will get amazing results without ever having to beat it into a corner.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I use a circle and a triangle in most of my, big sacrificial rites. But if you'll notice, my triangle is inside my circle, and I stand in the triangle with the entity as I'm evoking them. I don't put any protective barriers between me and them. I want to get as close to them as possible. They're my friends. I look at them as brothers and sisters, like you were saying. There are certain types of rituals where you might want to use the traditional circle and have the triangle outside the circle to somewhat separate you, but people don't understand, like that circle, man, it's not going to stop that thing from coming in there and touching you if it wants to. It's just not, at least in my experience. So, this, you might, if you're doing like a really baneful operation, where I'm, say I'm offering baneful implements or elixirs into the fire, then I might not want to stand in the triangle as I'm doing that. In that case, I have a whole separate ritual space for baneful operations, where I have the circle and then the triangle, and then the fire is built inside the triangle that's across from me. But that's really just to keep from exposing myself to the harmful things and energies that I'm placing into that fire. And that actually works pretty good for me. I have not had any bad results from that. Where they really go wrong with like baneful spells, especially like sympathetic magic, is they end up getting their own DNA on the fetish link. They're handling it with sweaty hands. They're getting their skin particles on shit, or they, you wouldn't want to put your blood into a curse jar for somebody else. You just would not want to do that, because if you got your DNA on the sympathetic link, then it's linked to you too. It's going to affect you just as much as it does the target, if not more. So, I mean, it's often stupidity that gets us in a pickle, and it's not karma or rule of three or anything like that. Some of my early experiences or experiments with baneful magic did backfire on me, and it's because I got my DNA where it shouldn't have been, on the fetish link, and so it affected me as well. And I did an evocation with Ophal. I'm like, hey, what's going on with this? I don't believe in karma and shit like that. So why is this affecting me in a negative way? He's like, well, you got your sweat all over the string that you tied it together with. It's like, you put your DNA on the fetish link, dumbass. Go dig it up and burn it and do it again, but wear gloves this time. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, cool.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that was actually something I was going to bring up after you started that topic of baneful magic. Is I like the fact, and I do that also, is you don't touch the items that you're going to be using for baneful workings. And that is something that specifically with your videos, and there's been several things now, so I give you kudos on a lot of levels, that I've seen you do things, and I'm like, oh shit, I do that, and I haven't seen anybody else do that. So that's awesome. I mean, most people don't get to see my workings. Maybe someday I've thought about releasing some work, but I kind of more behind the scenes guy. But I love the fact that you do that, because you should be wearing gloves when using elixirs and when using certain potions and things. You should not be just openly dripping it, because now you might have gotten some on your hand and then you're wiping it on your tools, and then you're using that working and now it's all over you. Or you've gotten, as you said, your DNA in that jar, and then you wonder why all of a sudden, boom, shit's happening to you in your life. So that's something, folks, if you're listening out there and you ever practice in baneful magic, you need to be smart on how you do it. It's serious shit. This isn't something, oops, I made a mistake. No, your mistake can kill you, it can kill other people, and it does. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of it. And that brings me to one of the questions I was going to ask, because you certainly are a participant and practitioner in doing baneful works, and have, many times over the years. I think, and I'm sure you would agree, that most people's mistake is they jump into wanting to cast a curse against someone on something petty enough that shouldn't have one cast. Or they're not steadfast enough in their own heart to truly stand by it, so they cast it, and then within a week, things start to happen to that person, and then all of a sudden they feel bad about it, or they want to take it back, and there is no taking it back. And one thing I've found through other people's mistakes, not my own, is that is one way you can truly piss a spirit off. If you ask it to do a job for you, and it is halfway through doing its working that you've requested, that you've bothered it to do for you, and then you want to take it back, or you don't want to see it through, you are not only wasting your time, but more importantly, wasting their time. And that's when you will see shit happen to you, is you've now turned your ally into an enemy.
Absolutely. I think a lot of practitioners that have really practiced baneful magic have probably learned that lesson the hard way, and I have as well. First of all, if I always tell people, if you would not outright shoot that person in the face and feel good about it later on, then don't throw a curse at them, okay? Because, you're pissed off at your neighbor or, somebody, an ex-girlfriend or something like that, and you, throw a curse at them, to get even. And next thing you know, they're dying, horribly, or suffering from a fate that's even worse than death. And at that moment, people would give anything to take it back, and you can't. I mean, some things you might be able to undo, like sympathetic, magic. If you go dig it up and burn it, then you might be able to alleviate that person of the effects. But chances are you're not going to be able to take it back. And so, and I have to catch myself too. Somebody will piss me the fuck off, and that's my first thing, I want to do something in retaliation, and I'll sit down and I'll really think about it. I'm like, okay, a year from now when this person's, coughing up blood, dying of cancer in the hospital, am I still going to be this mad, or am I going to wish I hadn't have done that? And usually the answer is I wish that I wouldn't have done that. So, I mean, I don't offer baneful services to the public. It's more like special request. And, once in a while, I'll get an email or a message, or I'll talk to a person, and they're dealing with a situation that I do think warrants a curse. And, if it's a certain type of condition, then I'm willing to do it and feel good about it, such as pedophilia, rape, things like that, extreme abuse. I have no issues at all cursing a pedophile or a rapist or someone that likes to beat their kid and their wife. But for petty stuff, it's just don't do it. It's not a game. It's really serious. And after that person's dead, you got to live with that. And so if you're not going to feel good about it later on, then think about that now before you throw that curse, because it really is no different than shooting someone. It just takes longer for them to die.
Correct. And I think that's the key, is you really have to self-analyze and say, you know what, I'm fucking furious right now at this person. I don't like them. I want them to suffer. But then you have to look and say, you know what, next week, am I going to care about this? No, I'm going to have forgotten about this. Well, then is it worth torturing that person's life? But if you say, no, next week, next month, next year, I'm still going to hate this motherfucker, then go ahead. Unleash the wrath. But you can't feel bad about it. So you have to make a clever decision. And once you have decided, you better buckle the fuck up and just deal with it. And I am one that doesn't do baneful workings often, but certainly have. And when I have, I've struck like lightning, and I'm fine with that. I feel no sorrow or mercy for the people that I've used it against, because they deserved it. Yeah. And I won't lose an ounce of sleep because of that. And I had someone ask me one time, what kind of pussy shit is that you're striking someone who doesn't know you're striking? I think it's beautiful. You can call me a coward. You can call me anything. Yes, like you said, you have to be willing to shoot that fucker in the face pretty much. But I don't want to go to jail for the rest of my life. Exactly. So I can sit in my ritual temple and I can recite some words, because I have the free right to do that in front of candles. And if you just so happen to have everything fall apart on you and you ultimately die, I mean, hey, who's to say? Maybe that was my workings, or maybe that's just fate. We'll leave it at that. But I don't call that cowardly at all. I call that precision attack.
Same here.
I know that you certainly, and I think you nailed it as well. I don't think you can appropriately offer that to the public, because here's my thing. If you are someone out there, you are a woman whose husband's been beating you, you don't practice magic, but you come across a site like jsgarrett.com and you say, I know you do these workings, would you be able to do this for me? Because you're just not a practitioner. That warrants maybe a case where you do that. But where I don't like it is where people practice magic, and when it comes to getting their fucking hands dirty, they won't do it, and they only hire someone else. And some people say that's okay. I don't feel that, because if you're not willing to pull the trigger, then the trigger shouldn't be pulled. Like I said, there are those rare cases where someone just isn't in this field, and that's understandable. But if you are a practicing magician, if you don't have enough gall to practice, to learn, it might not be able to happen tonight. You might have to spend the next 6 months working on this asshole to get to the level of doing it, but that's the point, is you have now put every ounce of your well-being, your will, your focus into learning the ropes to be able to strike this person, and when you do strike, it'll strike hard. So it's all about putting in the work, and I think a big thing these days is people just don't want to put in the work.
Yeah, that's really what I see the most is laziness,
Can't stand it.
Yeah. People that, they want all these things that magic can bring them, but they don't want to do the work themselves. And, even if you hire somebody to do the work, the spell work for you, there's still shit. The physical has to match the metaphysical, like you're still, I can do a ritual to help you, your business be successful. But if you're not willing to get up and go run your business, correctly, then it's, how is that going to work out? Or if you, want to find a girlfriend or a boyfriend, yeah, I can do a spell to help you do that. But if you never leave mom's basement and you don't take a shower, and you don't have, anything to offer another person, then what good is the spell going to do? You have to make the physical effort and do the work and capitalize on the opportunity that the ritual creates for you to make that happen. And, what you were saying about, somebody was saying that, doing a curse on somebody was a cowardly thing to do. Like, okay, well, if we lived in the Wild West still and you could challenge someone to a duel and legally shoot them in the street, then, yeah, I would go that route every single time. Okay, but, we don't live in that kind of world anymore. It's not illegal to pray for somebody. It's not illegal to put a curse on somebody, but it is illegal to go over to their house and shoot them in the face. So, that's the world we live in, and that's why baneful magic is so beautiful when you're dealing with a scumbag that really needs to go.
It is, and I love it when and obviously I'm not someone who will tell anyone of my baneful workings, so when I do one, I just keep my mouth shut. But I've known people before that have known folks that have had issues with me that I felt that level about, and then all of a sudden mysterious things happen, and they're looking at me like, what the fuck? And you just give them that smile, you just give them that little smirk, and you're like, yep. But that's the thing is you have to be willing to go all in to make your workings happen. And it touches back on a lot of things we were saying. Is a lot of people will say about the workings they're doing, but you can tell when they're not actually doing them, because if they're not putting in the work, it shows. And I think a lot of people aren't doing that. So it's a shame, but it is what it is. But like I said, when you're going back against it, I think, and one of the questions I was going to ask you tonight is when you're going back on your word, if you're not putting in that extra work. Well, the reason I was saying what I just did is that a lot of people say, I summoned this spirit and asked for this and it gave me this. I have a hard time buying that if I ask you, what have you been doing to reach that goal? I asked for a new job and then a phone call came out of nowhere and I got, a CEO position. Well, have you been putting in applications somewhere? No. I don't know if I believe that exactly. You have to put in the work, like you said. Just because you're asking for these things doesn't mean you're not going out and putting in the legwork. In fact, that is vital to doing these things. It is the current. It is the wind that'll push you in the right direction, but you still must be moving. Wind isn't going to move you if you're sitting still. So, but one of the questions I was going to ask you is, people burn those bridges with spirits that they've worked with. Do you think those currents can be repaired if you completely foul it up and mess it up? Have you ever had experiences where you've worked with a daemon or an entity of sorts that for some reason just did not like you or click with you? I know people will tell about tells where they've summoned a certain spirit that just did not like them. I personally have not.
I have screwed up before. Working, one in particular instance, and this is really the only one that comes to mind when you ask me that, is and it was my fault. The whole thing blew up in my face, and it was my fault. And then the spirit turned against me, and I tried to fix the relationship and could not seem to fix the relationship. So I ended up having to put forth a great deal of effort in order to banish this particular entity. And I still feel bad about it to this day. Like, I wish I could fix it, and maybe I can somehow. Maybe I can figure out how to fix it. But what I did was I I didn't tell my wife. I'm married. I'm in a monogamous relationship and have been for almost 14 years. And I decided to have a succubus bound to me. And I didn't tell her about it. Okay. I didn't realize how physical this thing was going to be. And it was very physical. It was a very successful ritual. And my wife started noticing that there was something else in the bed with us. She could feel it touch her. She felt it breathing on her, and obviously the physical sensations that we both experienced were very physical and very real, like having an invisible person in the bed with you at times. Okay, and so my wife starts interrogating me. Like, what have you done? What is this thing that I keep feeling in the bed? And so I told her. It came clean. And she got pissed. She kind of lost her mind on me a little bit because I didn't ask her about it. It was something that affected her very greatly, and she didn't know what was going on. So, I mean, she took that as a betrayal, and I guess it was. And so she starts not only bitching at me, but cursing the spirit too, and so the spirit did not appreciate that at all, and so then it began attacking us, and I was not able to successfully repair that relationship between the two of them, and therefore I could not repair the relationship between the spirit and I. So I had to terminate that, and it took a great deal of effort to banish that and break that binding. And that's something I still look back on at my early days of being a magician and shake my head. I'm like, what a dumbass I was. Whereas if I would have told my wife what I was going to do beforehand, and it would have been something that we consensually did together, then it could have remained a beautiful thing, because it was a beautiful, amazing thing up until it blew up in my face because I was not honest about it. So it was my fault, and I'd still like to repair that relationship someday if the spirit was willing.
I'm sure there'd be a way of making a working of sorts that you could speak and communicate with the entity, but on a level that wouldn't put you at harm, allowing you to try to repair it. Now, sometimes there's things that just can't be repaired, but it would be curious to know if there was a way of doing a rite to repair that, just for repairing's sake.
Yeah. I'm sure there is. I mean, anything's possible through these practices, but that's something that I'm going to have to, dig into. I thought okay, summoning them and, offering them a sacrifice and, maybe an apology might work. And, so I actually tried that shortly after all of this happened, and that did not work out for me. So it's going to take something. I'm going to have to figure that out. If anybody has any ideas, by all means, shoot me an email or something. But it's something that I'm going to have to figure out on my own, most likely, and see what I can do there. But yeah.
Now, I like the fact, and you just said it, you have to figure it out on your own. From what I see of your workings, you are mainly, and it's not to say that you don't work with other practitioners, but you are mainly a solitary practitioner. You mainly do most of your workings yourself, or I do see you doing workings with your lovely wife. The two of you do a great job in bringing these workings out. But is that a safe assumption to say that you're not? I mean, you don't have to speak on this, but the debate comes a lot of times with people asking about lodge magic compared to solitary practitioners, and someone who's a part of a lodge or someone who's a part of the OTO or any of these organizations out there have more or less power than someone that does it on their own. So I always like to ask my guests, what is your thoughts on solitary practices compared to lodges and compared to being a part of a group?
Okay. Well, so yeah, you're correct. I mostly work solitary, or I work with my wife. It's usually just us. But I also think that I think that for each, if you're working towards a goal or trying to destroy an obstacle, I think that the more practitioners that are focused on that, the more powerful it's going to be. So I think for every person that participates in that ritual with you, you are amplifying the power of that ritual. The problem is getting 7 to 10 people on the same page that work well together and that aren't going to fuck it up for each other. and that are serious and do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it. That's very difficult. And so I do have a handful of competent magicians that I've worked on some group projects with, my wife and I. And we live in different parts of the world, so we're doing synchronized ritual together, asking for the same thing at the same time in the same manner in a ritual fashion in order to make something large happen on a very large scale. And we've had some success with that. We've actually had a lot of success with that. But the problem is finding the people. It's getting everybody on the same page, finding a group of people that can get along with each other and, that are going to do what they say they're going to do. So, I mean, I think if I had, 20 or 30 magicians just like me that were, all doing the same ritual together, I think we could move mountains, but I don't know if I'll ever find that many competent sorcerers that are willing to work together on something and get along with one another. The quality of people just isn't out there, man. Like there's a handful, but as far as doing it on a large scale, that's kind of like, that would be a dream come true. But at the same time, I'm not holding my breath waiting for it to happen. If it happens, then it happens. But I prefer to work alone because then I don't have to deal with other people's bullshit.
Yes. And that's the reason I do most of my work alone. I have worked with other practitioners, but I've always been kind of a lone wolf, but I prefer to work alone. And like you said, to not allow someone else's shortcomings to fuck up my working, because I take my work very seriously. Yes, I do a lot of rituals. Yes, I do it daily, but it means something to me each and every time, whether it's a small scale ritual or a very large scale. And if I'm putting my time and my focus into it, and then you come along and you haven't worked your parts, you haven't been doing the pre-prep steps beforehand, and you just dilly-daddle in and fuck it up, I'm going to take that as a personal offense to me, because it's not just like, oh, okay, we'll do it again tomorrow. No. Especially depending upon the working, if it's following lunar cycles, if it's following certain time periods, you might only get one chance at some of these rituals. So a lot of times I do it myself, even though it could call for more than one, because I know that I'm true to myself. But one of the things you said I think would make a difference is if you make a congregation or a pact of people who are all solitary practitioners working in a group effort, you would have more success than finding people that work in lodges individually from lodges to get together as a group and make it work. Because one thing I find, lodge magic can be very powerful, group magic can be very powerful, but a lot of times each one of these pieces are only a cog in the ultimate machine. And they run their purpose perfectly. But when you take that piece out of it and you throw it into your workings, they might not know how to do the full workings. They might only know how to be that cog. And that's happened a lot, where they know their role, but they don't have a grand scheme. And when you work with solitary practitioners, usually they're either versed and very good at one field, or they're versed across many. They do chaos magic, they do sigil magic, they do evocation and invocation, astral projection. They do different things. Whereas a lot of times lodge magicians, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but a lot of them that I've come across seem to be focused on one thing. I'm a Golden Dawn member and we strictly do Golden Dawn, or we are strictly OTO. And you're missing the bigger picture. Is really, at the end of the day, if I strip the OTO away from you, what are you? Are you still competent without your brothers and sisters? I don't know.
Yeah. Probably not in most cases. Probably not. I'm not saying that would be the case for all of them, but I've never been a member of a lodge, never been a member of a coven or a cult or secret society or order or anything like that. And that's because with any group setting type thing comes bullshit,
Yes.
And, there's always a hierarchy. There's always, a guy at the podium that everybody else is basically following. And, it's just, I see the same problems in all these different groups that I've looked into. And I've just never felt the desire or the need to belong to a group. Maybe it's just me, but I get off on the fact that I stand alone, I am proud of that. I think, that the strong man stands mightiest alone. I know that's like a Hitler quote, but that is something very true that man said. And even though I don't agree with his racial ideologies or the things that he did, even as a bad person or an evil man in our society, he did accomplish great things on a massive scale. They were great and terrible things, but he was very much an occultist. He was very much a magician, and I don't necessarily agree with what he did, but he did amass a great amount of power, and they did take over a very large portion of the world. I mean, there's something to be said for that, even if it's something that we don't agree with.
Oh, there was. And I mean, touching on that factor too, I don't think a lot of people, we're not going to dive too into it, but I don't think a lot of people realize that the SS and the Nazis were performing very dark occult workings. Yes, they were doing a lot of experiments on human bodies, but there was a lot of occult side to that too that people don't realize, and workings that were going on ceremonially behind the scenes, trying to open and awaken and summon some very powerful forces, which I think in certain realms they did, to have been able to take over as much of the world as they did, to be able to have lasted as long as they did. I think there was certainly some help from some very dark forces. So, but as you said, the strong man stand alone. What's that?
We see that in the U.S. too.
Yes.
Like, the U.S. government was basically founded by the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, and they were into some very dark occult stuff too. And yeah, they built this great nation, but at the same time, they genocided an entire race of people in order to do that, So, I mean, that's some really evil shit if you think about it. It really is. But it doesn't mean that the systems that they're working with aren't powerful,
Oh, absolutely. They're very powerful. There's two different sides of the coin. A lot of people say there's no such thing as light or dark magic. It's just the practitioner. And to a major degree, that is the case, because you're using the currents of magic to either do good or bad. But there's certainly some dark fucking magic out there. And I mean, I'm certainly a black magician myself, but I mean, there are some world, campaign dark magic where it's beyond things I'm doing. I do things to enlighten and grow myself. I use the power of darkness to grow. And I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding that. How could you do dark workings to grow yourself? Well, it actually makes a lot of sense at the end of the day. But there are people who strictly are for absolute darkness, and that is taking over the world. That is making millions suffer. That is creating heinous and horrible acts against humans, genocide, different things of that nature, and they use these forces. And unfortunately, that's always going to be the case. But I think, most of the time, it really is just about growth of self. But you have to, as you said, be that standalone wolf. I have been a part of lodges and a part of different groups. And I did it more from a factor of, can they teach me something I haven't learned myself? I've spent 17 years researching, reading hundreds of books, doing thousands of rituals to figure out and experiment. But I've only ever known my own teachings. What could they teach me? And you know what I found, folks? Not too fucking much. So when you go out there and you start learning, as you said, it's that hierarchy of this is the way we do it. Don't question the rules. Even some of these groups, you would think they would never have a problem with, you being a solo practitioner. They want you to be a left-hand path practitioner and be your own person. And then when you start questioning things, it's the same right-hand bullshit of don't question what you're told. And I have a problem with that. I don't need to stand there and be a part of the congregation that calls themselves wolves, but yet still herd together like a herd animal. Nor do I need to follow the guy at the podium and jerk him off. If anybody, I'm going to be at the guy at the podium getting jerked off. So that's the way it's going to be. I ain't jerking anybody else. So it's a question I like to bring up to certain practitioners to see what their thoughts are, because I know some of the people I brought on the show certainly are a part of organizations, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just find myself having more results to myself. Plus, I can do the darkest shit in the world I want to without any judgment from anybody. Because even some of the people that are dark magicians, sometimes you say some of the shit in the workings you're working on, they're like, that's fucked up, man. And you're like, I don't need that toxicity in my life. Let me just do my darkness. So, But let me real quick, I want to jump in before we get any further because we're almost wrapping up here, folks. I got carried away with JS here. We've been going in for a little while. I wanted to give a shout out to both of my sponsors. First and foremost, Limitless Liberation, which was inspired by both Lucifer and Belial. I am going to read this from the owner, Elena. I'm going to read this from her perspective, which says, Lucifer has been with me most of my life as far back as I can remember. Belial and I started to work when I was going through a very difficult part of my life. He completely turned mine and my family's life around for the better in a very short period of time. In return, he asked me to create what he called Charger for him. He showed me the design, so I created the first Charger for Belial, and Lucifer wanted one next. From there, I had spirits lining up with requests for magical items. Some are control freaks, others will just inspire. They all are so individually different, but every single item created has power within it. Each item operates on many levels. They operate as an anchor for the spirit you're working with, aiding easier connection between the two of you. They also operate as a power cell or battery, where they already come with an inherent energy to them, but they become stronger as you feed them and pull from them during ritual, as well as strengthen your workings. Limitless Liberation continues to grow to honor the spirits we love to work with and build relationships with. And you can check out her work at etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation. And again, that's etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation. Her workings not only on what I call the pyramids of power, or what she calls Charger, but her other workings on everything that she creates is just gorgeous. Her work is flawless. It is something that is rare. It is something that is powerful. It will charge your ritual space. I stand by it. You should pick yourself up something, whether it's just for meditation purposes or whether it's for evocational work. Her pyramids of power give that extra oomph whenever you're calling on a deity to come, that it feels respected when you go out of your way to have a custom piece, an expensive piece made for it. It does actually work, and I stand by that. So make sure you check out her work and pick up something today. My second sponsor is Goetic Impressions, which formed as a partnership between Ben, who is Frater Adamastro, and Sor Alara, with the intention to bring ritual-accurate magical tools to the public for an affordable price. One of the largest barriers to entry for new practitioners looking to experiment with magic of the Western grimoires is how expensive and difficult to find real ritual tools are. They first launched with their Kickstarter to bring their Goetic medallions to life, and since then have also expanded with an Enochian toolset, and most recently a Satanic medallion and altar set, which is currently live on Kickstarter. With over 20 years of magical and occult experience across a range of traditions, Goetic Impressions is the place to find affordable, high-quality ritual items. You can check them out at goeticimpressions.com. Again, that is goeticimpressions.com. I always make my listeners work for it. I do have a 10% off promo code for listening to the show that you can get on a single item or your overall order, but I don't just give it out. If you want it, go like the Knights of the Nephilim page, go like J.S. Garrett's page, hit me up in a private message, and I'll give you the promo for 10% off your order. But they make phenomenal workings. To my left right now, I have an altar cloth from them. I have a Goetic invocational mat when I am doing my Solomonic work, as we talked about earlier. I have medallions from them, and I'm soon to pick up one of their beautiful crystal balls to use for my scrying abilities. So check out what they do. They do amazing work, and so does Limitless Liberation. Check them out today. All right, brother, so we actually have hit our hour-and-a-half marker, so I should probably be wrapping this up. But before I go, I want you to let me know of anything else that we missed tonight that you would like to talk about, any upcoming projects or things we can be expecting from you, and also where we can check your work out at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, you can check out my work at jsgarrett.com, and as well as on my YouTube channel, which is JS Garrett also. The big thing that we've got about to drop is the Satan Compendium through Become a Living God. That is dropping on December 29th, and that is like the final compendium in the Gatekeeper path working, and that's going to be awesome. My wife and I actually co-authored an essay called The Satan that is published in that grimoire, and it's about her reverse baptism. And we are also going to be following that up with a mass reverse baptism ritual, like a mass group ritual that people can sign up for at a very affordable price, where we are going to perform a group rite to break that spiritual bondage that baptism has over people. So that's the next big project we're about to roll out. So definitely check that out on becomealivinggod.com.
No, that's awesome. And that's something that I will stand behind that 100%, because unfortunately so many people are baptized at an infancy where they don't know any better. They don't know anything, but they are offered pretty much by their parents. It's the same as offering a sacrifice. You are pretty much offering a sacrifice to Yahweh and saying, I am giving you my child's spirit and soul. You now have domain over them. Now, you as an individual can choose to walk a different path, but you still have those fucking roots embedded deep down inside of you that will not let go easily. And even through workings, through massive hours of meditation, you can think that you have everything pried out, but those little bastards stay in there deep. And sometimes you need specific workings, like a reverse baptism, as you put it, to get rid of that and completely wipe and eliminate and eradicate all traces of your former, religion or your former dedications that you didn't make but your parents made for you. And that is a strong thing, because if you've been doing practices, you've been getting results, but you just can't seem to hit the depth that you wanted to, it could be you're not ready, could be you're not focused enough, or a lot of times it could be that there are things internally inside you that you do not know or are not aware of that are slowing or hindering you down, because they're still in there trying to fuck up from who you could be, because they want to keep you as the sheep. They don't want to let you become the wolf. So as JS just said, look into that, hire them for this ritual. It's something I stand behind. I have went through this myself years ago, and honestly have been thinking about doing it again, because I think, like I said, I am definitely left-hand path as I can be, but going through Catholic school, going through years and years of church as a kid that I never wanted to be a part of, I think still has some fragments of roots in me. And I'm not afraid to admit that to anyone. So sometimes they need to be pried out with force from others. Sometimes you can't just do it yourself. It's always been me doing it for myself. So something I might look into also, folks. So make sure you hire them for this amazing ritual. Also, the last of the Gatekeepers books is going to be pretty phenomenal. This has been many, many years in the making to finish out the 9 books. So it'll be nice to see the final conclusion of the full circle.
Oh yeah, man. I appreciate that. Those are kind words, and thank you again for having me on. It's an honor to be on the show, and I've had a blast sitting here chatting with you, dude. That hour and a half flew by. I didn't even realize how long we've been on. So thank you.
No, absolutely, man. It was great having you on as well. I look up to your work. I think that you are one of the very rare gems. I have a lot of people on the show. I respect the people I have on the show, but there are specific people that, to me, stand out much more than others that I truly don't have just for a promotional or let's hear who you are, but I actually respect their work, and you're one of them. So kudos to you on everything that you do. I think you're a rare gem and something the occult scene needs. For anyone listening out there, make sure you check him out on jsgarrett.com, and make sure you check out our upcoming episodes. I gotta sometimes look at my planner to even see who I got all coming up, but on the 7th of January, we got Orly Stewart from Becoming a Living God as well. She's coming on to talk to us about many great topics. The following week, we have Elric Rogoski, and if I fucked his name up, I apologize. He has one of those crazy last names. He's from Order of Defiant Darkness. We also have, let's see. I had to jump across the room real quick. We also have coming up a Serial Crabbat, Infernal Obelisk, and Maximus Tyrannius Avery. So, I mean, I couldn't be happier with the guests that we have coming up on the show here. We have a lot of great topics, so make sure you tune in 8 to 9:30 Eastern Standard Time on Thursdays, 3 times a month. Tonight, as we said, is a special episode. Make sure you click the like, share, and follow button. If you missed it and you're tuning in just now, you can always go back, download the episode, or stream it later on any platform that you see fit. Make sure you check out JS's info. And other than that, folks, thank you so much for tuning in tonight to Nights of the Nephilim, and we'll catch you next time. JS, it was a pleasure.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.